So we want to look at the structure of the Constitution that was written um, by these delegates who came to the Convention of 1787. Um, just kind of take a general overview of the document itself before we begin. There are 7 articles in the United States Constitution. It's actually a very simple document to break down. The core of the document is these 7 articles. Um, At the end of that document, there are 10 amendments that were passed immediately, um, called the Bill of Rights, very famous portion of the document. And then since that first, those articles are written and we passed the Bill of Rights, there have been other amendments added to the Constitution today that includes amendments 11 to 27. The articles themselves, the 7 articles, we want to talk just for a moment about each one of the 7. Throughout the course, we'll develop many of these to a much greater degree, but for now, we want to have a sense of each one so we can kind of have a general understanding of this. Article 1 creates the legislative branch, the 2 houses that we talked about in the representation compromise information, upper and lower. And the legislative branch is that part of government that makes laws, that has the power to actually write laws. Second article that's in the Constitution, Article 2, is the one that creates the executive branch. The executive branch of our government is headed up by our president, and it is the part of our government that has the power to enforce the laws that the legislative branch makes. Article 3 creates the judicial branch. The judicial branch has the power to interpret the laws that the legislative branch makes and that the executive branch enforces. Very important to understand at this point that this is very different from the Articles of Confederation. Under the new Constitution, we have 3 branches of government, and notice how they took the law, the power involving law, power to make law, power to enforce law, and power to interpret law, and they put it in separate branches of government. That's what we call separation of powers. And so not one entity or individual or group has all of the power. One has the power to make the law, one has the power to enforce the law, one has the power to interpret the law, and they all kind of have to work together to figure out how to get this all accomplished. This is called separation of powers. We're also going to talk about how these 3 branches have lots of checks and balances uh, kind of within the Constitution that have one branch checking and balancing the behavior of another branch. So those first 3 branches, though, are incredibly important in our government that exists today nationally. Article 4 deals with the word that we're going to spend a whole week on in this course, and that is federalism. Now, federalism is used in many different ways. We often say the federal government, meaning the national government, but that's not exactly the proper use of that word. It's also been attached to political parties in our history, but the actual word, what it means, and how we're going to use it in this course is federalism means that what we have existing side by side in America are regional governments alongside of a national government. So when they created this new constitution, they did not just wipe out the states. They didn't say that there's no reason for these regional governments anymore. They allowed states to continue to exist and function and do lots of things that the national government has nothing to do with, but they also created a national government as well. So when we have both of those things existing within one country, regional governments and national government existing at the same time, we have what we call federalism. And Article 4 deals with How's that going to work? That's kind of a complicated thing. And there's other parts of the Constitution that deal with this as well. The basic role of the states versus the national government, Article 4 develops that conversation. Article 5 creates the procedures for amending the Constitution. Remember, one of the flaws in the Articles of Confederation was there was no way to amend that document. The Constitution that we wrote in 1787 has a two-step process for amending. Someone has to propose an amendment, and then there's a process for approving the amendment. And you can Google this as well. There's several ways this can happen, but basically, proposing an amendment either occurs with two-thirds of the Congress and then ratified by three-fourths of the states, or three-fourths of the states propose an amendment, and then three-fourths of the states have to ratify. Notice in both of these methods that the states have heavy involvement, if not complete involvement, in accomplishing an amendment. But it is possible. It is possible to amend the Constitution. And I think on balance, we've had a reasonable number of amendments in our history.
Article 6 contains what's called the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution. It answers the question of what part of government would be supreme, and it has a simple statement in there that whenever there's a question about what part of government is supreme, that the Constitution itself is supreme.
Article 7 deals with how to ratify the document so that it would go into effect. And notice, very importantly, that they decided to have the document ratified by state conventions and not by state governments. Instead of having the state governments, where there were a lot of people that were concerned about creating this stronger national government, and a lot of people had vested power that they wanted to maintain. Instead of having the state governments ratify the document, they set up a system in which states would elect people to go to conventions. So put it closer to the people that probably had a more sympathetic view of wanting to create this national government. So there's the 7 articles. There's also the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was passed almost immediately, and it was passed to deal with issues related to what the 7 articles didn't say, that some people thought they should say or that we should include in this conversation. Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. It was, again, added immediately because of fears that the Constitution itself, those 7 articles, did not contain adequate limitations on the national government's power. In other words, it said a lot about what the government could do, but it didn't say enough about what the government can't do. So you notice in the Bill of Rights, again, which we'll talk about extensively later in this class, that you have things like freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to trial by jury, all kinds of things that the Constitution just didn't talk about. It wasn't necessarily taking those rights away, but people wanted a guarantee that the national government, and it's important to understand, the Bill of Rights is a Bill of Rights initially that was written to protect us from a more powerful national government so that they couldn't take our freedom of speech or our freedom of religion away from us. It was not meant to protect us from state governments. It was 10 amendments that were attached to the United States Constitution, which in effect limited the power of the national government.
So, since we wrote the 7 articles of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we have amended the Constitution um, actually 17 times, amendments 11 through 27. And if you think about it, that's not too many amendments. It's not like it's hundreds of amendments, but it's also not too few. It seems like the founding fathers got it right that they wanted a document that could be amended, but wasn't so easily amended that we amended it too many times. And some of the big things that we did in amending the Constitution through the years, things like ending slavery, granting civil rights, giving women the right to vote, changing how we elect presidents and how presidential succession works, and a number of other things that were critical things that were necessary as the country grew to be changed in our Constitution. There's one thing that we did that was kind of interesting that actually didn't last, and that was prohibition. When in the 20th century we prohibited the sale of alcohol, and then a few years later repealed that particular amendment. But all in all, the 17 amendments to the Constitution were things that were necessary and helpful in the development of our country, and I think can point to a kind of a success in the process that the founding fathers created for amending our Constitution.
I'm going to deal with a couple terms here before we go on this particular PowerPoint. The word citizenship and naturalization. Just want to make sure you understand these words. Citizenship is how an individual accesses the rights and protections in the Constitution. I am a United States citizen. If you're a United States citizen, everything we are talking about relates directly to you. You have the rights and protections that this Constitution has. You can become a citizen two ways. You can either be born a citizen or you can be naturalized as a citizen. Naturalization is the process by which immigrants can become citizens. People that are not born citizens of the United States, how they can become citizens is the process of naturalization.